Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Noon, and I am the chair of the Ontario Forage Council. So this is the second of the 3 webinars for this year's virtual conference. I would like to thank Dairy Farmers of Ontario for their generous partnership of this year's webinar series. We really appreciate the support of the DFO. I would also like to thank Kubota Canada Limited and Ontario Sheep Farmers for sponsoring all 3 webinars. Please take a moment to visit kubota.ca to see how Kubota can help with its range of solutions to fulfill your forage making needs, from tillage to seeding to crop care and forage harvesting, as well as material handling and beyond. So thank you again to Kubota Canada. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Northern Ontario Farm Innovation Alliance. Today's session is called Post-Plastic Forage Storage. Single-use plastic is an issue that concerns Canadians. Preserving silage and baleage creates a lot of plastic waste on farms. Today's discussion will focus around innovations to keep bale wrap and silo covers out of the landfill. This complex issue will require multiple solutions working together. Our panelists bring diverse solutions to this problem. I will let them introduce themselves and solutions they are working on before we get into the question portion of the session. The 3 panelists today are Kim Timmer, Lynn Levitt, and Dr. Erica Pensini. And starting us off will be Kim Timmer.
Thanks for that, Terry. I'm just going to get myself set up here. Perfect. All right. So to begin, thanks so much to the Forage Council for giving me some time on the panel today. Whenever I get a chance to share the floor, I guess today it's the screen with folks like Lynn Levitt. It's really always a treat. And I'm sure that I'll feel the same way about Dr. Pensini at the end of this hour. So before I specifically talk about what we're doing with some of the plastics used in hair silage plastic production, here's a bit of background about Clean Farms and who we are. In short, Clean Farms helps Canadian farmers manage the plastics that are really important tools in their farming operations. And we do it by working with a variety of partners. One of those extremely important partners is industry. So manufacturers, retailers, and distributors of items like pesticides, fertilizer, or animal health medications, quite frankly, they finance the work we do. And the visual on this screen really captures what this financing allows us to do. We ensure that items that are used on the farm are sent for safe disposal, or at least to safe recycling end markets. A little bit of background about myself. I've worked in the agriculture industry for about 13 years now. I like to tell people I started when I was 12 or I was 15, but that joke is getting a little bit old. In terms of agricultural plastic recycling, it really first caught my attention in about 2010. And I feel like I've had almost a front row seat to all the developments that are going on across Canada. I was quite heavily involved in the launch of Canada's first government regulated ag plastics recycling program. And that happened in Saskatchewan in 2018. So there's a lot of different progress, a lot of different activities going on across Canada. And I've been privileged to see them all unfold. So getting back to Ontario, Clean Farms is really well known for one of our long-standing recycling partner programs, where we partner with ag retailers to ensure that empty pesticide and fertilizer containers don't end up in the countryside or in landfills or in blue boxes, and they're circulated back into the economy. We also offer an obsolete or unwanted pesticide and animal health medication collection program that I hope folks have been able to take advantage of. Now, these 2 programs are really only successful because there's a really strong sense of stewardship and doing the right thing in the farming community. And that's probably why one of the most common questions I get when I'm at conferences or when we used to go to trade shows is something along the lines of, I'm so glad that I can recycle my empty chemical containers, but what about my bale or silage wrap? What about my twine? When are you going to help me with that? And up until earlier this year, I never really had a good answer to that question, but I really do feel this is going to change in the coming years. And one of the reasons that I'm optimistic is because Clean Farms recently received federal funding for a project that will help the ag industry really strengthen its approach to managing plastic waste. And this got us started on a project that we've named Building a Zero Plastic Waste Strategy for Agriculture. The main goals of the project are to update relevant data. And this sounds boring, but it's really important. So we will be undertaking a national province by province waste characterization study, where we're going to identify the major types and quantities of ag plastics used. This also includes something we call an end market assessment to determine where exactly plastic recycling facilities exist for ag plastics and where there are gaps. And this data will be available in early 2021. One of the things we need to do is build consensus on the appropriate management of non-agricultural waste. So we're going to be hosting consensus building sessions in major ag regions where we will be bringing together recyclers, producers, grower groups, municipalities to discuss long-term planning. And this is also going to take place in the first quarter of next year. Right now, we've got a grower survey underway where we're going to be measuring current farmer attitudes and behaviors towards recycling ag plastics. And measure them again after the pilots are underway and after education programs move forward. And finally, and probably most importantly, we want to demonstrate best management practices for ag waste management through on-the-ground pilot projects where farmers are going to be asked to experiment with us. We'll be asking growers to properly prepare their materials for recycling, something that, as Lynn will tell you, it takes work. And Clean Farms is tasked with trying to find end markets for these materials. And this also takes a lot of work. And I can't stress this work or this preparation sort of step enough. When you're collecting plastics for recycling, I want everyone to keep in mind that you're not creating a pile for the sake of creating a pile. We are collecting a commodity. And it's a commodity that someone else is going to use to create a new product. We want to market a high quality commodity. And I think Lynn's going to drill down on the importance of quality as well. Now, before I share the floor with Lynn, I wanted to just give a couple of high level points that I'd really like the group to keep in mind as you're having conversations about plastics recycling. So first, a little bit of data. So according to a 2011 study, Ontario farmers use about 7,000 tons of ag plastics as part of their operations each and every year. And again, we're going to have updated data for this in the new year. Out of that 7,000 tons that used on Ontario farms, 3,500 tons are some type of plastic film. And of that, about 2,400 tons is silage film and bale wrap. So I want to share that so you have an idea of the volume of the commodity that's out there for us to work with. The other thing we really need to consider is that there's a lot of sort of small recycling initiatives that are already underway. And Lynn will hopefully touch on some of his work. And there's works going on in the north. And any work that Clean Farms does or any other organization does really has to complement or enhance these projects. And while there's also a lot of interest in plastic recycling, as we found out in the introduction, as you probably realized before COVID-19 really took over the headlines, plastic recycling got a fair bit of interest from the mainstream media. And this interest is actually ongoing. But that leaves me to my last point. Well, there's a lot of interest in plastics recycling. We all need to be aware that there's also some skepticism. So here at Clean Farms, we really welcome questions about how we ensure that the plastics we collect are actually recycled, because we monitor the process, we audit our contractors as well as our customers. As a little bit of an aside, any of those empty containers that you return to your ag retailer, they're recycled into drainage tile, that black sort of drainage tile that's on the field or next to a home. It's a low human contact product. We do leachate tests on our plastic just to ensure safety and whatnot. And so anybody involved in recycling, whether it's your municipality or a private partner, if you ask them questions about what they do with their plastics, they should really have a sound answer as to who, what, where, when, and how an item is actually recycled. And so my point here is just be aware that there's skepticism out there, and that there's a lot of pressure on those of us who are passionate about this, those of us that are working in this field, to build trust in what we're doing. It's about building credibility and really convincing farmers that if they're going to take the time to properly prepare their materials for recycling, we're doing our part to make sure it's recycled. And that's why it's so very important that you do that sort of boring background research, which we're currently undertaking. But when it comes to these on the ground pilot projects, it's so important that you start small, you build a model that works for a particular region, and then you expand. And so while Lynn is making progress in Prince Edward County, Clean Farms is hoping to start a pilot project in Bruce County next year. This is still very preliminary, but we hope to work with a few communities in Bruce County and experiment with recycling items like twine, silage film, and bale wrap. We'll be experimenting with different collection models, whether it's an on-farm collection style depots, different methodologies, whether it's using collection bags or on-farm presses to efficiently prepare the material for transportation. So I think I'm closing in on my 5 to 7 mark now. So I think I'm going to stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the pilot during the Q&A session or afterwards. Before I close, here is my contact information if you'd like to have another conversation about this. And I'll quickly just acknowledge the folks that are funding this project, which is Environment and Climate Change Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. It takes time and resources to do this work, and I commend these departments for committing resources to that. So on that note, I'll stop there and pass the floor over to Lynn.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank the Forage Council for inviting me to be a part of the program today. Really exciting to hear what Kim has had to say, and I have to admit the folks at Clean Farms have been absolutely fantastic to talk to and work with at times, and really excited to see this much interest generated in recycling and what's going on. So I think I'd like to start off by just simply introducing myself. I describe myself as a seasoned farmer. I'm from Prince Edward County. That's that little gob of dirt that you see on the north side of Lake Ontario, not just a little bit south of Belleville. And that plays a bit of significance into this story. I'm an expert at nothing, but I've got many opinions on lots of things. And so with that, we'll start. I wished I had a different slide other than the one that you folks can all see. But it's pretty hard when you start a program like this or a project like this to predict what kind of pictures you might need to document what you've done. So anyways, my story starts some 11 years ago, almost, well, we're going into the 12th year. I'd like to say I was invited, but I was really volunteered. I sit on a local federation board. I'm part of the executive, and I missed a meeting. And I think because I missed that meeting, they volunteered me to sit on a working group made up of farmers and a college professor and some students from Loyalist College. We were invited to take part in this to try to come up with a solution to fix this problem. And so I was the go-to guy in the group. And through that experience, the faculty and the students came to the farm, and we got to meet the folks that actually manufacture the bale wrap, and seen some insight into municipality and how things are done. And when that was all done and over, I was introduced to all these people. And so during that course of time, the students were very eager to educate me about the evils of incorrect disposal of plastic, and soon asked what I did with it, and I didn't have the right answer. So yeah, with that in mind, at the end of that particular chapter of the story, what I came away with that group, we didn't really find an answer, but what I came away with was that at that particular point in time, this wasn't on anybody's radar. And secondly, I got to see how the rest of the world looked at this problem. And I guess, like all farmers, I had concerns and questions about what the fix might look like. Could we afford the fix? And you know, as farmers, lots of times we sit back and we go, well, you know, if we're not too happy with the way government does things. So, but I also strongly believe that we had an obligation to help be part of the fix. So, yeah. Okay. Slide number 2. So at the end of that time that I spent with the kids at Loyalist and the professor, came back, this was still the problem. This was still the reality. And so by now there was lots of discussion about single-use plastics and how to fix them and what to do. And like I said, I had all these questions. Would we still have plastic to use? What would it cost to fix that would be? And what might a real fix look like? And again, we had that, I believe that we had that obligation to be part of the fix. And so would that fix be affordable? So from all that, UPAC Agri-Service was born. It just, with all the things that that I seen from being with that group, I thought we should be proactive, and somehow I might be able to influence the future and you know, what the outcome might be. Looking through farmers' eyes with farmers' math, it made sense to me to just move it right out of the farmyard to the destination, wherever that would be. That it was a farmer fix to the farmer problem, and I believe that it was an affordable fix. So that was spring of 2016 that took place. So mission of UPAC Agri-Service was just to assist farmers recycle in efficient and cost-effective way. And so the concept behind the program was you, the farmer, compacted the plastic, you stored the plastic, then you delivered it to a central site, just as simple as that. And one of the concepts or the ideas that came out of all the research that I was involved in was I just wanted to simply make, just like in normal farming practices, take what we had and try to pay the bill. And so that meant that we had to see what we could do with the plastic and try to make it pay as much of the bill as possible. So two of the things that UPAC Agri-Service actually does is we created the compactor, which was significant in the process, and we also were arranging for places for the plastic to go. So we'll just talk now basically a little bit of a story. Maybe I should back up a little bit. The fundamentals of the plastic and making it pay the bill. When I first approached the situation, we created the compactor, had some plastic sitting in the backyard compacted, and those connections that I made with some of the folks at the companies that actually made the plastic, I phoned him up and showed him what I had done, and he was really quite impressed. It was a production manager at one of the plants, and he was really quite impressed with what we had. And he said, hey, I know a guy, I can make a phone call. And so he set up a deal, or helped initiate a deal, where we could actually sell the plastic. We were offered 5 cents a pound American for it. So with that in mind, that's what sort of initiated and started everything. So anyways, here we are with the compactor. So when we start off a bale, we fold up the first couple sheets of plastic, put it in the bottom, and I'll show you a slide later why that's significant, and then just simply tumble the plastic in loosely, and just as you build the bale, just make sure that it's placed in there evenly, so that when you compress it, the compression part takes place evenly. It's not like peanut butter. It doesn't squish out to the sides. So for that reason, you've got to distribute it in there. And as you can tell, I'll get my cursor going here, my mouse. When we first start the bale, the sleeve on the top of the plunger is placed on the loader spear this way. It can actually reach the bottom of the press or the bottom of the basket. And then next step. Once we get some volume in the bottom of the basket, then we turn the sleeve around and put it on the other way so that we can give it a full squish there with the tractor. By the way, these compactors work with any color tractor. They don't necessarily have to be this color. Non-denominational, I guess you'd call them. So one of the big issue, or the important things to remember when you're doing the compacting, is just basically leave the tractor on there long enough to expel all the air from the plastic. And once it goes down hard, it finds that level, and you can tell if you've compressed it enough, just basically by the fact that there's no spring back. So yeah, this picture is simply how we discharge the bale. This is the start. So you place the plunger down inside, you slide those two 2x4s over the top of the plunger, and simply lift the basket off the bale. At this time, or before you do that, you would you put 6 strings. You can notice there's grooves that go through here. You just slip 6 strings around the bale and simply eject the bale. Okay, this is actually a bale of what we call silage bag, and I use this slide just to show you the baskets back here on the tractor. Bale sits here, and these 2 blocks of wood are pretty critical. Just it helps discharge the bale. If you've done it properly or correct, when you go to pick up the basket off the base, the bale quite often sticks in the basket. So you place a block on both sides and push, let the basket back down, and then just simply push down with the plunger, and it acts just like a baler. It actually starts to expel the bale, and then by then you can usually just pick up the basket in the chamber, and the bale's left there. And so this blue pallet that's here, then you'd push the bale over on that pallet. And so just a picture of the 6 strings that's on there, and the fact this is a really dense bale. It would have the same density of a big square bale of hay. Okay, so once it comes out of the compactor, we add an extra 3 strings, minimum of 3 strings on this side, and that maintains the bale in a lot better shape. Keeps it, because come summertime, they have a tendency to, in the heat, they will kind of sag, or it is shrink wrap, so it does shrink. So the other thing that you need to know, what we recommend for storage is a double pallet underneath, and then take either an end cap or a piece of plastic and throw over the bale and cover it, because we do need to keep it dry. But one of the biggest issues that we've had when we go to pick up a load is that the water, if it's left uncovered, sits outside. The water actually filtrates down through the bale, and the pallets rat out pretty quick. So if we keep them covered, and that was one of the biggest issues when we actually go to load. So storage, we've just covered that. So each bale, or each compactor, actually has a number, so we have a trace back system so that we can just keep everybody up to date on what we find in the bales. As Kim talked about, we have to keep the integrity, and we can't leave rocks and hammers and dead animals inside these bales. So this is just a way for us to keep track of who did it. And if there's something that needs to change, well then, you might get a phone call or whatever, and we'll just give a little update on how that went. So when we started off, we used these plastic tags. I think that's what they're using in the Northern Ontario pilot project. But recently, I've talked to a new processor that's coming on board, and he would just simply like the number off the compactor written on the end of the bale. And that's one reason why it's important when you start and finish the bale to have that folded piece of plastic, so that we have a smooth end. Makes a tighter bale, good place for the strings to hold on, and then that number can be written in not a very large spot, but just a small spot, so a good trace back. And one other point, this is a real good tidy, I call them sexy bales, and I'll tell you, when the boys go to load them on a truck at the local warehouse, they really appreciate that, and it's critical to speed and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is a slide just to show you, my bales actually sit on clay, so sometimes we've fooled around here a little bit. Sometimes we can have up to 2 pounds of mud on each bale, and when you consider how much plastic, how many pieces of plastic are in a bale, and how much the compactor actually holds, that's a lot of dirt and mud. So number one, we've got to get that weight off there. We don't need to send it to the recycler off to market. But secondly, that's it's a no-no. They don't want that on there to begin with. So here's those same bales, and what I did in that particular situation is I just simply brushed that off, and that goes to show you what's acceptable. The recyclers that we've been dealing with, the people that have been taking this stuff, they consider that extremely good. It's important when you cut the plastic off that you allow it to air dry, and I mean, quite often I do it this way. I'll sit the bales on their end. Perhaps the night before I go to feed them, and if it's either drying conditions in wintertime or freezing, it'll freeze dry, and you can just zip the plastic off with a knife and give it a shake, and that's what it'll look like. Really can't stress enough about how we've got to maintain the integrity. And as far as I know, I don't think there's any recycler across the province, any process that doesn't want it to look like that. So the original plan was to transport this stuff on an open top trailer. First load went that way. Then there's some obstacles or some changes took place, and it was a little disappointing at the time, but now I really appreciate the concept of the idea of an enclosed trailer. So what we've sent so far out of Prince Edward County, the last 3 loads has been in the trailer, and if everything's done right, we can put 45 bales on the trailer through the warehouse at the local farm center, where we actually buy our plastic. They're quite happy to help us do this part to load through their warehouse. So what I've done is I'll put the 45 bales, I borrow a buddy's wagons. He has 3 mesh top wagons, and I put the 45 bales on the wagons, run them in the night before. The truck's supposed to be at the warehouse, and in the morning the truck arrives, and those guys, they have 2 forklifts going, and they can have 45,000 pounds of plastic on that truck in about 45 minutes. So yeah, this is my last slide, and I'm hoping that there'll be lots of questions today, because I know I've probably missed a lot of things, but as Kim talked about, and it's going to take everybody working together to do this, and yeah, I just look forward to later on here. So that's it for me.
All righty. Thanks a lot to you and to Ontario Forage Council for having me, and to all of you for being here today. So I am an environmental engineer, and I started at the University of Guelph in 2017. Before that time, I was in different types of industries, not only environmental engineering companies. So my core research focuses on the remediation of contaminants, but it is very important to prevent contamination rather than fixing it after the fact. So within this context, I am looking at making materials that are bio-based and potentially substituting plastics, although the journey is long. And so, like, just one moment, because I'm trying to, oh, here I go. So it was just lagging. So I don't think I need to talk too much about this, because Kim was good. And so she already discussed that there's a significant amount of plastic generated from, of plastic that is produced every year, and how a significant amount of plastic is also generated from silage wrap and bale wrap. And so, as you know, as Lynn was discussing, there are initiatives out there that are aimed at recycling. However, recycling can be challenging. So one of the problems about bioplastics is that sometimes there is some confusion about a bio-based plastic or sustainable plastic and a plastic that can be actually composted. So if we make a bio-based plastic, so a plastic that's not coming from fossil fuels, but you still have to bring it to a plant to recycle it, then the collection problem is still there. Okay, and in some respects, these plastics or bio-based plastics are also deriving from materials that can be used for food. So there can be conflict with the food supply chain, and a big gap is also cost, right? I see a question here: how resilient are initiatives that want to substitute plastics with bio-based plastics or recycled plastics when the cost of oil is low? So cost is always an issue, right? And of course, the materials have to be performing. So I mean, it's hard to beat a plastic roll that is flexible, doesn't degrade at all, and is cheap, right? With something that is more sustainable, but maybe not as robust, because the reason for which plastic is not biodegradable and for which it's a problem is that it doesn't fall apart, right? I mean, that's the good and the bad side of it. So what we're trying to do is make a material that can perform in the intended time frame the same way plastics would do. And as I was saying, the journey is long, but we have started working with the corn protein zein. And what is good about this protein is the fact that it's a byproduct of corn, so it's not something we would eat. It's fairly inexpensive, and it also would perhaps allow us to obtain a product that can be composted on the field but lasts for the intended lifetime. And so this is what we're trying to do. So now we hear some of the benefits, as I was saying, is the fact that it's not very expensive, and then we could also just avoid the step to really bring it to a plant. We could potentially leave it on the fields because it's really natural, and it wouldn't be a problem to leave it on the fields. So now, how does this work? Okay, so I got excited about this at first when my collaborator spoke to me about this. And so the reason for which this material is cool is that you can produce materials from it very easily. So you started with the powder that you see here in panel A of the figure. You can dissolve it in alkaline water, so water at basic pH. And then if you shift the pH or you add some salts, which can also include fertilizers, you end up by forming this mass, which does not redissolve in water. And at first it looks like bubble gum, so it's very flexible, right? So you can also use this material to produce spray-on films. So ideally you start off with a solution in panel B and you spray it on whatever you want to cover with it, and then you spray it again with say a salt, a fertilizer, or you can even just use something that's slightly acidic to increase the you start from alkaline pH and then you decrease the pH, and then you can solidify it also, right? So we made films like this. You see here that we essentially sprayed on part of a corn leaf or a piece of paper, and we formed these films. And we also tested this on soil. So essentially we sprayed on these pictures aren't the best, but essentially we sprayed on the soil these films, and then we proceeded to grow plants and showed that there is a decrease in moisture loss. So now, I know that this isn't really, this is mulching, it's not silage, but you can see how the concept could be applicable. Now, some farmers, when I spoke to them, said that this concept of bio-based is cool, but spray-on is not always what is most desirable. So the idea is that prefabricated wraps could maybe be more suitable for a bunch of applications, and certainly for bale wrap. So what we did is we tried to make films that are prefabricated, and you can, right? The problem is that these films are flexible at first, and then they become a bit less flexible. And if you can make them flexible on the long term, sometimes you lose impermeability. I'm not going into the details, but essentially it was hard to use Zane as such to have both impermeability and flexibility. So what we're doing now is try to modify the Zane. So once again, I'm not going into too much details, but you can essentially change the structure of the proteins a bit to make it more hydrophobic. Okay, so more water repellent, while allowing you to make films that are bendable. And the stretching is more hard, and we're working on that, but we can make them more bendable. And how we do this is as follows. So we modify the Zane, the corn protein, I already told you that, but then we combine with it as a material that comes from vegetable peel waste. So I've been collecting grape peel waste, and I've been collecting tomato peel waste, and extracting this it's a waxy material. It looks essentially like a wax, but kind of spreadable wax. And if you combine this with the modified Zane, then you can make films that are bendable and impermeable. So this is promising, okay? And we also try to use this material, and we coated paper with it. I mean, I know that this is maybe not so interesting for silage wraps, but at least you can make maybe plastic bags for agriculture and I mean food packaging if you're in that sector, right? So we made, this is just a small prototype, but if you take a paper sheet that is completely completely imbibed by water, and instead you pre-coat it with the Zane and the Q10 together, the solution, you dip it in, you let it dry, and then the water doesn't go in. Okay, so these were films that we made at the very small scale, and so and these are made once again with Q10 and then the modified Zane, which you read here as esterified Zane. You can just think of it as a modified Zane that is more impermeable to water. Okay. So this is what we've been doing. We've also used cellulose derivatives. So in this case, you can see that this film, we bent it 4 times and it wasn't breaking apart. And so it's not like you can just use the corn protein, you can use diverse products. And this is what we're really trying to do, like look at different products. And so now we've been making this at the very small scale, and once again, how can we make these at the large scale is what we're trying to understand. Okay, and so future work must involve testing different solutions, understanding how to make these materials at the large scale, making them both performing and inexpensive. But we have to understand, and this was one of the open questions, how can we make them competitive with plastics? Okay, if you factor in all the costs, this is one problem that like if you look at just the cost of a product, the manufacturing costs, and you just look at that, sometimes it's hard to beat it. But if you look at the overall cost, which is a cost that we are all kind of incurring because of, for instance, the fact that the soil gets degraded when microplastics are in it, or the fact that we all have this warm winter, which is great, but honestly, this is going to lead to scarcity of water resources, this big climate change, right? If we factor in those aspects, then you get the real cost, right? So maybe it doesn't have to be only the person who purchases the plastic that has to sustain the higher cost. It has to be like maybe incentives. I don't know, but my goal is not to rely on these incentives, is actually to make a product that is as cheap as it can be while being performing. And I suspect there's more questions here, but maybe I'm just seeing them. So what about end caps for bale wrap was one of the questions. And so I think that we can certainly do that with spray-on materials, but we would also like to try prefabricate it. And the idea is, if you want something that stretches and is applied like a typical bale wrap, then we have to do more work. But this is a good idea, David. And then Jeff is asked me.
Sorry, Erica,
Okay.
I'm going to field those questions to the panel.
Oh, sure.
They're not specific to you. They're all for everyone to discuss. So
okay, awesome. I thought they were just like, sorry, I just saw them pop up as I was talking, so I was just going for it. But
that's all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pensini, for giving us an introduction into the research that you're doing. So I'm going to ask Kim and Lynn to turn on their cameras and microphones again. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Christine O'Reilly. I'm the Forage and Grazing Specialist with OMAFRA, and the Ontario Forage Council has asked me to facilitate our panel discussion today. So first of all, thank you panelists for introducing yourselves and giving us some insight into the kinds of solutions to single-use plastic waste that we're generating with our forage storage. So the first question that I'd like to ask you guys is, what do you think the biggest barrier is for producers to move to more sustainable forage preservation systems?
Well, I guess cost would be one aspect, and also common practices. If I know how to do one thing and it works for me, then maybe why would I want to change to something that is more costly and would also involve, shifting my operations? Maybe these two. But I'm not a farmer, so Lynn can maybe help us more.
I guess you'd have to expand the question for a knucklehead like me to understand that a little better. I'm just not sure.
What's the hardest part about? Yeah, what's the biggest challenge in managing our plastic waste on farms?
I would probably have to say, with the conversations I've had with most farmers, it's really the time that it takes. Extra time. A lot of guys just like to zip the plastic down the top and run over it, and then want somebody. The common theme that I hear, anyways, is that they want somebody to come and just take it away. And I don't see that happening. There's not a place for that to go without a cost affected to it. The biofuel option, they're telling us that they can handle a lot of dirt in that, but it's going to cost. There'll be a fee, a tipping fee, a gate fee. So there's no quick solution to cheap.
Okay, so when it comes to the different recycling programs that Kim and Lynn that you both talked about, how resilient are those initiatives and projects against oil prices? Because as the price of oil comes down, the price of plastic comes down, so the plastic use goes up. So how does that interact with the ability for us to continue doing these recycling programs?
I'll maybe start this one off, Christine. I like this question for two reasons. It highlights that recycling doesn't actually occur until the item you've turned in for recycling is actually turned into a new product. So as a recycler, you're constantly looking for markets, you're looking for customers. This question also highlights, maybe indirectly, that recycling is a business, and it needs to be financed. And I mentioned earlier on that Clean Farms, we have about 70 members, so 70 industry partners who finance the work that we do. We also generate some revenue from the sale of the plastic we collect. And the revenue we received from that plastic has decreased significantly, let's say over the past 5 years. So that means the financial commitment we need from our industry members has increased. I would add that the low prices of oil, it's a global phenomenon. So what we're starting to see is a bit of leadership from governments as well as corporations. So corporations, multinational corporations, are now making commitments that they want to recycle, or they want to incorporate recycled content into their products over virgin content. So that's going to increase markets for folks like us. And you're also seeing governments that are mandating that. So they're going to start mandating more recycled content into plastics or packaging. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And to borrow from Dr. Penzini, it's a long journey, right? So we're just sort of on the beginning of that journey to see how those incentives to incorporate more recycled content into plastics and packaging are going to pay out.
So what do recyclers and buyers actually do with the plastic that's coming off of farms?
Sorry to take over, but that's another really, really good question, and everybody honestly should be asking it. You should be asking your municipality what they're doing that. For the plastic that comes in for our containers, it's high density polyethylene. That is going into farm drainage tile. With clean farms, we're very lucky. We only use North American market, so we know exactly where it's going. Out west, where we're collecting a lot of they're grain bags, long grain storage bags, and that's often the same plastic as silage wrap, for example. Those again go to North American markets, and they're being reused in plastic bags. I'm also involved in some work with collecting twine out west, and that is going to markets again in the US. And it's being that's polypropylene, and that's being incorporated into other plastic materials like roofing materials and stuff like that.
All right, thank you, Kim. Does anyone have something else to add?
Well, I was just going to say that the folks that I've been working with, it's just a relative new plant. We just moved the product to their plant for the first when they just got opened. We had a meeting scheduled. COVID got in the way. I got in the farm accident this year, so I haven't been to the plant to see, but they're on track to make plastic lumber and basically pelletize. They can do multiple things at the plant in London and basically pelletize and sell that into the market wherever it would be, but I haven't had a chance to fully investigate that. So yeah.
Okay, there's a couple of questions about things that may or may not be recyclable. Is net wrap recyclable? And what about end caps for bale wrap?
So end caps are the same as what we call silage bags, same material. In anything that we're doing, if you include that, all the different products have to be kept separately. So what I've been telling the folks with the net wrap, we've got people that are looking at that, and what I say is bale it up, clean it up, bale it up, and when we get enough, we'll find a solution for it. Certainly it's recyclable. With my conversations I've had with the people that I'm working with, I think one of the biggest issues is how they're going to reduce the particle size on net wrap, because it likes to wrap around everything. The makers of the equipment make big promises and say that it can do wonderful things, but I just have to see it before I can really comment too much. I'd have to see it done. But certainly what I've experienced so far is I can't find a home for it until we have it. It's been that thing, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. So, instead of sending it to landfill, we can't dig it back out of there, but you certainly can bale it up and sit it in the corner of your yard. And when we get enough for load, then we get it assembled and we'll find a place for it to go. And that seems to be how this project has went. One phrase I didn't use when I started, it's been, if anybody's ever been in 4-H, it was you learn to do by doing, and that's the way this project has went. And I'm not afraid to continue on doing that. And so that's sort of the answer that I have. Certainly BBL can handle that. The biofuel industry can certainly handle that product. It would be no problem whatsoever.
I'll add to that, Christine. When we get asked about net wrap, I often say net wrap is particularly problematic. It's actually made up of two different types of plastics, which almost creates a technical barrier for recycling. And then you add this sort of on-farm reality. Net wrap is extremely dirty at end of life, right? So as I mentioned, we see plastics, on-farm plastics, they're a commodity. We're trying to sell that commodity. And when you're looking at a commodity, you want high quality and you want it to be consistent. And so when we say high quality, we mean low contamination. And so as a general rule, you want less than 10% contamination by weight, and that's extremely hard with net wrap. But I also share Lynn's optimism that there might be other options for managing that in the future.
Okay, thank you. This question's for Dr. Pensini. Can you give us an estimate about how far away we might be from seeing technology like your Zyne films actually be usable on the farm? Do you have any guess of how far away we are from commercialization?
So actually, I guess that if you look at the spray-on materials, those are an easier catch because the really hard part is to make the materials flexible. So if any of you want to try the spray-on materials, I am happy to to bring them to you. And I mean, so right now I need feedback from the users, right? And so if the users say, okay, you know, we sprayed this on, it was awesome to protect our materials, then we're one step closer to commercializing the product, right? If you are looking at something flexible, no, that will take me some time. So that will take me like maybe like 2 years or something like along these lines. Now, if you're now telling me I want something flexible, bio-based, and I want the price to be the same, identical price to plastics, then we are much further away. And this is because I think there is an intrinsic, as I was saying, there is an intrinsic difference between the manufacturing and the cost of just producing something and the cost and the real cost the materials can have. So if we factor in all the costs, then we can make a fair comparison. But if we're just looking at manufacturing, then that's hard. But the spray on materials, if any of you wants to try them, they are pretty much ready to go.
All right, so if you're interested in participating in an on-farm trial, contact Dr. Pensini. All right. So this one is kind of going along that bioplastics alternative line. So current compostable plastics, I guess, are having issues degrading in some of those more industrial composting systems. Could bioplastics overcome that challenge? Is that a possibility?
Well, I guess it depends on, because yeah, once again, if you're looking at bioplastics that are like, PLA, based, then I mean, that's not something that is really compostable. So no, you can't compost it. But if you're using something that is actually made from a corn protein, that even if you leave it on the fields, it's okay. No, there's no decrease in the quality of the soil, right? Then you can just leave it there, like, mix it in with the soil, and then it will also provide a nutrient, right? Because it's just a carbon-based material that is completely degradable. I mean, the zane itself can be eaten, the modified zane, maybe not so yummy, but not toxic, right? So you can leave it in the soil and the bacteria will degrade it.
Okay. We've got a few different questions that are kind of related about costs and the economics associated with recycling the current types of plastics that we have on farm. So Kim, you mentioned in your talk that the manufacturers are part of the funding for clean farms, but are the costs associated with recycling existing plastics passed along to the end user? Does anyone know?
I can comment on that. Yeah, whenever we talk about industry funding our programs, you always need to acknowledge that price is incorporated somehow into the price of the product that goes on to the farmer. In some cases, like in Saskatchewan, you might have a separate visible fee. In some cases, like our container program, it's actually just incorporated into the price of the product. So when you're looking at developing a program, what I would call a permanent program that's going to service the entire province, I feel like producers need to be prepared that there is going to be a financial impact on them, and I encourage them to take part in these pilots, sort of to see how we can develop the most efficient system that has a minimal financial impact.
Okay. So what does it take to really keep the plastic clean? Because it's been mentioned a few times that recyclers want clean material coming in so that they can actually do something with it. So how much work does it take to keep the plastic clean enough that it can be accepted? And are there options for dirty material?
Wow. So basically, I mean, the way I do it here on the farm, get the plastic up off the ground as quickly as possible, and just simply air dry it. And with the basket that we've created, once it's dry, give it a shake and it goes in the basket. It helps maintain the integrity, and that's considered clean. Our water is an important resource, so the cleaner we can get it, the less water they use, the more sustainable this whole process is, for sure. I mean, sometimes you can throw it over the fence and let the rain wash it off. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways. When I started this, I thought every farmer would be able to come up with his own technique to actually perform the duty that he needs to do. And but yeah, there's all kinds of different options I could throw out there. But yeah, I find bale wrap especially is designed to everything to stick to it when it's wet. So if you dry it off, everything sometimes just falls off on its own. So.
Thanks, Lynn. So we've got a couple of related questions about if producers are interested in starting to do something right away, what could they do today or tomorrow or sometime this month? Like if they wanted to get started on dealing with plastic waste on their farms, what are some things they could do right away?
I'll jump in. For me, it's a little bit of a mindset when it comes to recycling. I'd really like producers to really start to look at their plastics honestly as a commodity, and that's a significant shift between waste and it's a commodity. And then I think that sort of gets you thinking about contamination, about keeping it clean, about ways that you can maximize the value of that commodity. So for me, it's right now it's just shifting your thinking a little bit there. But I think Lynn would have a better answer than I would.
I wished I did, but that was a really good answer. Because what I've encountered in trying to get farmers on board has been that very thing. It's been about change of mindset and the concept that it is a commodity. It's like, and I mean, as farmers, we're faced with this all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's a load of corn or whether I send a load of cattle to the abattoir. The part that they want, and the part they don't want needs to stay home. And so it's extremely important, again, that you do take a look at, that mindset is it just says it all. What Kim said it absolutely does say it all. I mean, I can't say it any better than she did. That's so true.
Well, I guess, I don't know, like this may be completely off, but in another time when I was a kid and in another country, we had hay sheds, right? And so, and there was no wrap around the bales. The bales were stored under a roof, and yeah, the weather was different. I grew up in Italy, but I'm wondering, is it even worth to have a one-time investment where instead of having to wrap every single bale every single year, you put the bales in a more protected space that you create once and for all, and that you don't need this plastic at all, right? I mean, it would be a shift, and I don't know if it would work in Canada, but would this be an option?
Definitely something worth thinking about. Yeah, there's a lot of complex production system stuff, but I'm getting some questions about your corn-based plastic.
Nice.
So have you done any trials on silo bunkers yet with it?
No, I've done them at the small scale in the lab. So yes, I took the material and I actually tested it in the lab. And so in the lab, it works, but we would have to really test it in a real environment where it's exposed to the air and it has to last for much longer. So I haven't done any real trial out there. And so it would be awesome if anybody of you were interested to reach out to me so that we can work together on this.
Right. And with the spray-on plastic that's ready for on-farm trials, is it easy to peel it or scrape it off the surface that you spray it on, or is it something that's safe for livestock to eat? How does that get managed?
So it's safe to eat. I neutralize the pH. Like the way you can do it is you can spray it on and then you can consolidate it with, say, glacial acetic acid to render the pH neutral. So like the pH of water, you can use some salts, and it's a very, like, you can make films more or less thick depending on how much protection you want. And if you create a hole, you can respray it on. And so you don't have to rebuild the whole patch or rewrap the whole thing. You just spray it on the area that is uncoated. And really, I know that there's regulations around animal feed, but in terms of safety, I can eat the same I mean, and I did, not with a taste of acetic acid in it, but I mean, if you mix it in with a large amount of hay, I don't think that's too bad. So it would have to go through our regulations if you were to make it a feed, but per se it's not toxic because it's a corn protein. And with adding glacial acetic acid, you may be not getting the best taste, but you get some protection against mold, which is good.
Okay, thank you. If a producer wanted to get a compactor on their farm, where could they send their plastic bales? How does someone get involved with some of the recycling solutions that are already being implemented if they're not in a current pilot project zone?
Well, I think the first thing that has to happen is the farmers have to come together. That's the one thing that I've done so far. It's not something a single person can do. We've got to have 45,000 pounds at a time. So we're talking about maybe in a municipality, the farmers were to get together, join forces, and decide that they're going to participate because we need efficient transportation. I mean, the recycle truck goes by my house every week and they pick up everybody's recycle, and so that's what we sort of need to, one of the things we need to be looking at. And certainly just last week there was a municipality next door to me for the first time the municipality actually got involved, and I guess they're going to piggyback on with the for the pilot project. But it was really good to see the municipality take a lead and help organize it, and they've looked into a place to actually accumulate the bales when the time comes and help get them loaded. That's one of the big ticket items. So yeah, it's not that difficult, but we just, as farmers, we need to step up and work together to do that. And it's sort of a new concept. It used to happen a long time ago, but it's a bit of a new concept for some folks. So.
I agree with Lynn that the solution is bigger than one farm, and so you do need to work with others in your community in order for us to actually sell the plastic and get recycling markets going where people will count on this plastic for making new items. We need a sufficient volume of material to market. So I do like the idea of farmers getting together and making sure they have a consistent commodity in their region, and then working with someone to make sure that they're able to find an end market. Again, you don't just want to collect it for the sake of collecting it. You need to collect it in a way that minimizes contamination and that it can actually be sold into recycling markets.
Okay, so some rural municipalities have seen agricultural plastics recycling programs come and go. What is the likelihood of plastic recycling and these kinds of management programs actually sticking in the future?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, and that's why I said we have this almost credibility problem that we're gonna have to tackle. I have friends working in building public trust in agriculture. Well, we got to build public trust in agricultural recycling. At the same time, I think there's a completely different mindset that there was, 5 or even 10 years ago when nobody really cared about plastic. So we've got momentum on a number of different fronts. But I think that the key thing is I'd love to see groups like the Dairy Farmers of Ontario and other groups really make commitments to incorporating recycling in their already sustainable commitments. So I think we have to again see a bit of a shift in mindset, and then those of us who are working in areas like clean farms where we're supporting farmers, I think we can really accelerate our programs that way.
Okay.
Could I just comment on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, in the beef industry, we see, McDonald's is now promoting sustainably produced beef. So that's all on the forefront. I mean, I see the pieces really coming together. Like Kim said, a number of years ago, it wasn't so much. Now it is. When the Asian market thing, when that all got revealed, that we were sending all our goodies across the pond, people's eyes got opened up and they kind of got a bit of a conscience there. So I don't think the municipalities have too much choice anymore. So I think that part of it is they've got to trust us. But we as farmers and working with people like Clean Farms, we've got to forage forward. And you know, it's a marketing tool that we're now going to use in the beef industry to be sustainable. So we've got to step up and be the good stewards that we say we are. And I think the pilot projects that are happening, I think the one that's going on in the north has really cracked this thing open a little bit, and it's got a lot of people thinking, hey, this is possible. And so I have, you know, I look with a lot of positivity, and I'll tell you, you know, when I first started this, it was a tough go. I really wasn't sure that we'd ever move forward or move ahead with it. So yeah, I have a lot of good things I think is going to happen. I'm excited.
All right. For the interest of time, my final question for all three of you is just some final thoughts, or what is something that you wish everybody knew about the single-use plastic waste coming from agriculture? So final thoughts, or what do you wish everyone knew?
Okay, I'll start. So first of all, I really think it's important, and I know everybody probably on this panel knows, but it's important for people to realize that single-use plastics are tools for farmers, right? So they're really important tools, and you would only use it if you absolutely have to use it. And then the other thing, again, I want you to start looking at plastics as a commodity. And that's going to sort of lead us to our next step in really finding a solution for it.
So I guess my one single comment would be, I've run across a lot of folks that think somebody's going to come along and fix this. And we're going to have to step up together and fix this. I would agree with everything that Kim just said. And the only thing I could add to it was just simply say that nobody's going to come along. This is not going to disappear overnight. And it's going to take everybody to make this happen. And I think also as a farmer, I've seen since I've started this, how we can actually influence the outcome in the end as individuals if we all participate, if we're allowed the opportunity to participate. I mean, my vision was just to simply see all the plastic wrap in Ontario sitting in somebody's yard baled up. And if we all did that, then we could take it to the next step and say, look, we need to take this to the next step. If we need help, then we've proved that we're all going to participate and we're serious about what we're doing. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, and I guess that for me, it's I think it's important to also not think that this is just a responsibility of the farmers, but also create initiatives where it's either mandatory or subsidized or integrated in the legislative tissue that you have to have sustainable solutions. So it's not just the farmer has to become sustainable and spend more money, but we're all willing to pay the cost of more sustainable solutions, because at the end, the climatic changes and the scarcity of natural resources touch all of us. So it's everybody's responsibility to pitch in and be willing to spend more money to achieve this sustainable solution.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our three panelists, and thank you to all of you for submitting your questions. I'm going to pass things over to our chair, Terry Noon, so that he can give us our final wrap up. And I think Terry's going to need me to do that.
Thanks, Christine. Thank you to our panel. That was excellent information. Everyone really appreciates you taking the time to be here today. And I think we learned a lot about what some of the products we're using, what some of our options are, and what some potential future options could be. So excellent information. Again, I'd like to thank all our sponsors for help putting this event on. It is with the industry support that really helps put a good program together. So again, to the Dairy Farmers of Ontario, Kubota Canada Limited, the Ontario Sheep Farmers, and today's sponsor, Northern Ontario Farm Innovation Alliance. So thank you to all our sponsors. I appreciate everyone that was able to attend. And we will have our third and final Forage Focus webinar tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So I invite everyone back for the final event because it's been a great list of speakers so far. So thank you everyone for attending. And thank you also to Christine O'Reilly, Lynn Levitt, Dr. Erica Pensini, Kim Timmer, Patricia Ellingwood, Michelle Linington, and everyone else that's been worked behind the scenes to help put this together as well. So thank you very much to everyone on that end. Thank you.